Hey there. Welcome, Cold Springs Church in the world, to the Pop Podcast. We are on episode 2. If you didn't watch episode 1 and you're like, man, why do they call it the Pop Podcast? Here's why. When we think of the church, we think of it like a wave, specifically a Tahoe wave, Lake Tahoe here in Northern California. And that wave, it goes out and it gathers energy just like any other wave. So that gathering of energy is like a Sunday morning gathering, right? And then the spreading out is you going out into business places, into your families. You're spreading out throughout the week. What's unique about the Tahoe wave is that it's not quite like an ocean wave because it leaves water behind amongst the rocks. And that water that is left behind, we want to call that, for the illustration, like a pool of peace or a portion of peace, a pocket of peace. So we're hoping that we are people of peace that leave behind or float in, sit in pools of peace or portions of peace. So Pop, the Pop Podcast. We are a poppin' podcast. We will not be locking, though, because we're Christian. But we will be dropping on Wednesdays. So you got to check us out. Every Wednesday, we'll be dropping the next episode of the Pop Podcast. With me today, I have Nick Campagna, who's the lead pastor over at Radiant Church here in Placerville. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, man, it's great to be here. Just glad you introduced me by rhyming my name a bunch of times, too.
Yeah, I could have.
You could have.
I've done that in the past. Me and Nick have some history. But before we get to all that, every podcast we have a drink that we give the guest. And this drink is from Dutch Bros, and it is Bugatti Berry. Okay?
All right.
So lots of alliteration, lots of rhyming already today.
Yeah.
So what you're going to have to do is at the end of the podcast, you will rate the drink. But we're all going to be watching whether you continuously drink it throughout the podcast to see like what your thought is. So
sounds good.
Bugatti Berry.
Give it a shot.
I hope that it's just that great for you.
Cheers to a good podcast, man. Here we go.
Amen. Praise the Lord. PTL. So Nick, I know you've grown up around here for the most part, but give me like a snapshot of like what young life looked like for you. What's your religious background? What were maybe some things that your parents deposited in you from that time?
Yeah, so I would say, my family moved to the Placerville area when I was about 4 years old. Grew up, or I was born down in the Bay Area, south of San Francisco. And when we got up here pretty quickly, started coming to Cold Springs Church, used to be called First Baptist Church of Placerville. So very exciting.
There you go.
I came here, I think about the time I was like 6 years old when we started coming here or something like that.
Okay.
And so I grew up coming to church here. And I would say like one of the more influential things as I grew up was probably a program that my mom would volunteer in. And my sister and I went to, it was called the Awana program. And they would basically have you memorize just a bunch of scripture every year. They would incentivize that with different rewards and stuff like that throughout the year. But it really it was foundational for me, just drawing me into God's word and just implanting some of those passages, really important key passages, deeply into my heart. Yeah. And it was a great experience.
That's cool. So talk to me about, I know in high school at some point, I forget exactly when, that you had call into ministry, distinct moment. Talk to me about that. What did that look like?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I wasn't really, it was a rough season. There was a tough stretch there for me, where it really could have gone off the rails. But God just was really gracious in that he put certain people in my life at certain times to keep me from making some really poor choices and really causing myself some more significant problems. So I was super grateful for that. And just, I remember one story in particular was where I was planning on going to a winter camp, but like none of my friends were going to go. So I was going to bail out. Right. And it was
natural youth experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right. So, and it was a kind of the low point in my high school experience. My grandpa had just passed away, and just some different stuff going on around all that, and just in other parts of life as well. And so, no one was going to go. So at the last minute, like 2 days before the camp or the week of the camp, one of my friends was like, "Hey man, are you still going to the camp? I'd love to go. And so ended up going. And it was a great weekend, good experience. And after that, I remember I got back to school the next week, and somebody was like, "Hey man, like, where were you this weekend?" And I was like, "Well, I was at this camp. I actually invited you to come with me. You know, you said no." And he's like, "Oh yeah, that's right." And he was going on about this party he'd been at and how he was like, he called to invite me and all that kind of stuff. And I think, like, you know, for the most part, I wasn't super drawn to just going out and drinking and smoking and doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
And the whole like hookup culture around all that and everything else. But like, I think at that point I probably would have said yes, like to going. And I don't know, like what could have happened during that, at that time. And so God just like kept me from going down that path, in that moment, like kind of at my most vulnerable point when I was in high school. So that was a really cool thing. So then a couple years later, I was pretty listless, and it was like, had an idea of, you know, what I could do with my life after high school. Cause you know, for some reason we put a bunch of pressure on people to have like a plan for their life when they're, you know, 16, 17, 18 years old, as if they're going to have it all figured out. So, so I had a great answer, great idea of what I was going to go do for people, but I wasn't really sold on it myself. And I remember went on a mission trip. The first time was actually it was just like 3-4 months after the camp experience, and just felt like, this guy shared his story about going to the mission field at on the mission trip that we were on. And he made this like invitation for people to like go and be missionaries. Yeah. And I remember feeling like something stirring inside of me, but then like, I don't know, I just wasn't in a place where I was ready to really be super curious about that. And so, that kind of died down, and then had a couple years of like just silence from God on all that. And to be fair, I wasn't really like seeking him in that, in that way, in that season. So, but then coming into my senior year, it was like, okay, I got to figure something out. And, right about that time, the church had just hired this guy, Andy Abramson, to be the youth pastor. And, he had started investing in me, and, we went to a conference, and, just really clearly at that conference, this guy gave a really explicit call to ministry, or invitation for people to move towards pursuing vocational ministry, and felt like God just spoke directly to me in that moment of like that he was drawing me towards that. And so as we walked out, I was actually there with my dad, my sister, Pastor David from the church, and a bunch of other people were there as well. Andy was there. And my dad was like, "So what'd you think of all that?" And I was like, "I think I'm going to be a pastor." And he just kind of like smiled and nodded. My sister was like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, I think I'm going to be a pastor." And it just made sense. And it was just felt like the right thing. And it was funny because it went from like total vague, like non-clarity to, oh no, this is what I'm going to do. Yeah. So in that moment, it kind of like changed my trajectory of like what colleges I was going to go to and all that. So that worked out pretty well, because me and my wife and Megan and at college, the one I ended up going to. So that was great. But God just used that moment to invite me to start walking in that kind of direction. And
So with Megan, was that like a ring by spring situation?
Yeah, so we were in Bible college, and here's the wild thing, dude. There were people who like met in August, were engaged by like October, and they got married in December. Like shockingly, like some of those marriages were unsuccessful.
Winter. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sad. I shouldn't make fun of that.
Yeah.
But you know, so there was some definite. They had ring by winter. Yeah.
Wow.
Like
that's a timeline
they spent one semester in the dorms as freshmen in college, and then they moved into at Bible college. There's like married student housing. So like
because they know the trend, the pattern.
They're trying.
So they kind of.
It's definitely an environment for that kind of thing. Yeah. So Megan and I, we actually started dating. We knew each other. We met right off the bat our freshman year, and then started dating and during the middle of our sophomore year. So it was about year and a half before we started dating, and then we got married after we graduated. So
there you go.
It was ring by summer 4 years later.
Yeah. So there you go. That's great. Okay, so then right after college, I know you come back here, and you're youth pastor. How long were you youth pastor here?
Yeah, so that was actually kind of a similar story to like the call into ministry thing,
Yeah.
where God just like, there was this moment, this season of just, or this, it was a pretty short one to be fair, like, but there was a window of time where it was like, I just don't know where I'm headed next. I had looked pretty extensively and going to seminary, decided that wasn't the right thing at that time for me. And I looked at some different options. I was working like driving a forklift in a warehouse, which was super exciting. It was 2008, so the economy had just crashed and the recession was like in full swing. So
Yeah.
I was doing that job through a temp agency, just got my college degree.
Wow.
And proudly, it's actually a fun job, but actually enjoyed it quite a bit. But while I was waiting, my friend was like, why don't you just apply for youth pastor jobs? Like, there's a ton of them out there. And I was like, I just don't feel like that's necessarily what I'm supposed to do. But just before that, Pastor David had actually come up and performed Megan and my wedding. And the day before my wedding, he looks at me and he goes, so what's it going to take to get you back down to Placerville? I was like, oh man, like I'm getting married tomorrow. Can I focus on one major life transition at a time? He's like, yeah, that's fine. That makes sense. So he gave me like, 2 or 3 months and then called me in October. That was July. So he calls me in October and he's like, hey man, so what do you think about being a youth pastor? And after having that conversation with my friend where I was like, no, that's not what I'm going to do, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't feel necessarily a specific call to youth ministry in particular. But in that moment, kind of like the initial calling to ministry experience, it was like I had total clarity of like, this is the right thing to do. Like this feels right. So went home and Megan was out. She was working kind of late that night. And so I was waiting for her to get home and was like, hey, what do you think about moving to Placerville?
Yeah.
Doing youth ministry. And she was like, what?
Yeah. Okay.
No,
So
yeah, she was excited about it.
yeah. So the average stint of a youth pastor is still 18 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long were you a youth pastor?
Yeah, for about 12 years. I was here as a youth pastor.
So I just have to pause it there because I had David on last episode and I asked him how long he had been a youth pastor. And it was about 18 months, 2 years.
Yeah.
And he said that he actually left that church. He'd killed that youth group.
Yeah.
That was his contribution to the church. That's how he phrased it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then he made the statement. He goes, Daniel, you are a better youth pastor than I ever was. So you and I kind of hold that title together because the youth ministry here hasn't died.
That is true.
We haven't killed it.
But it did die initially when I was here. Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It was like 2-3 years in. It was pretty much DOA, man. There was very little pulse left.
Okay.
Happening.
So did you actually like ever officially like end it and then restart it? Or did it just kind of life support you and a few students?
No, yeah. The thing that really helped was like we started our student leader team, or we called our core team, student leaders, and just to have a smaller group or concentrated group of students who were bought into what we were doing that we could invest in more directly and focus on that and disciple them well. And so that was our when our focus shifted into that, that was super helpful. Yeah. So it created a healthier culture within the ministry. And then as people came and visited, it wasn't just, the culture was fairly toxic for the first couple of years. Yeah. And so, we got home one night from youth group and Megan looked at me and she was like, how you feeling tonight? I was like, it's bad if the youth pastor doesn't want to be at youth group, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, that's not good. So what are we going to do about that? So we just like established some rhythms to mix things up and created some rhythms within our programming to make it a little bit more like not just the same thing week in and week out, and then started the student leadership team. And that was super helpful. It just allowed space for a lot healthier ministry, I think. So
yeah, that's cool. Well, if we could, we'd have a trophy case here of better youth pastors. And David, he added on after that the bar for that is low. Because he goes, well, you and every other youth
18
pastor.
18 months and dead youth group.
Yeah. So for whatever that's worth, I felt like we had to go there.
But like on the upside, like somebody else got to walk in and start from scratch.
That's what he said.
That it is true though.
It's a great way to reframe it, I think.
Yeah, but it's better than like walking in and having to wade through the sludge.
No, for sure. And then you have it, and I mean your story, right? Like 2-3 years having to kind of watch it, and then rebuild it. Instead just coming in and
and the big thing was like there was a big wave of people who had been there, and when I got there, like 80% of the youth group was sophomores, juniors, and seniors in high school, and so over the first 3 years, 80% of the group graduated. And within the church, we didn't necessarily have very many older elementary kids. So it's not like there were kids sliding up behind them. And so, it was just it was a challenge the first few years.
So I intersect into the story of you youth pastor at like, I don't know what, year 8, year 9, something like that. When I was a sophomore in high school, my buddy Zach invited me to youth group. And I've been to multiple churches. Youth groups for me were like 3 people that were at a small church I was at. My dad was our youth leader for a stint. So like Cold Springs was the first like youth group that I was at, that it was actually a group, not just like a few people. And I
remember you showed up and like you're actually wearing something similar to today, like a vest.
I was really into vests. It was much more egregious though. Vests with hoods. Like, it was a style for me.
It was great.
Not for anyone else, really. It's one that I paved the way.
It was unique.
Yeah, it stood out.
It was bold.
Yeah, you're right, bold. I think that's a word from the Bible, so it's a good thing to have. So I come, and the first night that I come, it was like an event night. But it was like serve the kids ministry, and there's some event. Everyone's like, the youth kids are all leading. Like
I vaguely remember, I remember that night, and I actually remember that. Like I can picture you actually standing out there. But I don't remember what the event was. Do you remember what it was?
I don't.
Was it trunk or treat?
Maybe, I don't know.
Because it was a trunk or treat like thing.
Yeah, it was. Like kids came, like smaller kids came, and the youth were leading games. There was face painting. There was like a mini golf section. There was a bunch of different stuff. So I jumped in and helped. But I remember I walk into your office, or I mean a broom closet office, whatever it was, in there, and you had like the big principal's desk. And you're sitting behind it, and you say what's up to me, and you even kind of laugh like, what a night for you to come. Like it's all about serving tonight. What was funny is that really I remember you from that night, but I remember Hannah, my now wife, from that night the most.
Dang, dude.
She was doing face painting. Wow. So that was a very like intrinsic moment for me. Coming in. So that's when we
it was a life-changing
intersect.
Night. Wow.
Yeah. I saw the light, some would say. The beauty like I had never seen before. So that's where our paths initially intersect. I don't know if I feel like looking back, I was kind of spotty to youth group.
I was pretty partial to Hannah, so I probably would have like tried to chase you off if I knew you were like,
totally, for sure. So I was pretty spotty to youth group, and what really connected me in was Mission Placerville. Did you see that a lot with youth, that there were certain things that you knew, the kids that were spotty or kind of on the outskirts, if they can just come to this, they'll connect in? Or was it a little bit more nebulous than that?
Yeah. I think like having some space where it was just more of a relaxed evening, or like there was a little bit of a different focus was helpful for getting people connected. So specifically, I would say with the Mission Placerville thing, if people came to that and experienced that, it seemed to be a big accelerator as far as like building relationships and connections to other people within the ministry and everything else. And it would really draw people in quite a bit. And I think like it took me a few years to figure this out. The first time I really started like in reaction to going to camp the first summer I was here, where we went to camp and we rented a camp and we ran our own program. And it was fun. Like we had a good time. Like we had a good number of young adult leaders who were helping out and like investing in the kids and doing all that. And so that was cool. But I remember like walking around that week. It was like a 4-day camp or something like that. It wasn't even that long. Like I remember walking around and the whole time people were like, what are we doing next? What are we doing next? What are we doing next? And it was like, all I heard was like, entertain me. And that drove me crazy. Like it's like, I never want to do this again. Like,
Yeah.
And So as I thought about it, I remember that the church, like Andy had done this thing that he called Mission Placerville. So we were like picked it back up and kind of expanded on it and created it into like a week-long camp and overlapped it with our kids camp or VBS program over the summer. And so the teenagers would come in and volunteer in the VBS program in the morning. Then we go out and do a service project in the afternoon. Then in the evening we would do like more of a classic camp like program, right?
Yeah.
But most of the day was spent serving. So the idea was like, how do I get these kids to stop just thinking about themselves? Like, I can't out entertain them over, like, I can't provide more entertainment value than an Xbox or YouTube or movies, right? So how do we get them to stop focusing on themselves for the week and to look out and actually focus on, maybe loving God and loving other people? And that's kind of the realization that came like 2-3 years in was, it's actually like we're doing that. We're doing the thing that Jesus said is the most important, which is love God, love other people, take your eyes off yourself for a minute, and you might experience some joy and thrive. And that's the response we got, even the first year.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, I know for me, like I always look back to my first Mission Placerville as relational connection. Like it connected me to the group, and all of a sudden I was going every week practically to youth group after that as much as I could. Even in football season, like walking over from Eldo before I could drive.
We could have given you a ride, dude.
I know. Shelley Blair did once, and she was driving across. Me and Abe were walking, and Anyways, so, but I mean that it instilled that, and it's interesting because you would say usually like a serving camp wouldn't gain that much momentum, or the thing that you would remember wouldn't necessarily be relational connection, but it totally is. Because even as you're working together and all that. So,
it was pretty funny, dude. Actually, your now father-in-law teased me when I was trying to launch Mission Placerville, right? He was like, so wait a second, you want me to pay to send my kids to sleep at the church and go and do other people's yard work for a week? He's like, I could just not pay and send them down the street and have them do my neighbor's yard work. I was like, yeah, but you're not going to do that. And it was $25. I was like, can you really feed both your daughters for like $25 each for the week? And he was like, fair point. So
that's good.
He was giving me a hard time. They were.
No, it's good.
Super
He needs to sometimes be pushed back a little bit, So I think that's healthy. That's good. Man, how much the price of Mission Placerville has increased.
Yeah, it's gone up a little bit. You know, like we were trying to. Again, it was the recession, right? So people didn't have a lot of expendable income at the time, and things were really tight. And so I was just trying to remove any barrier possible from doing it. And we found people who would drive for us during the week, and we slept here at the church. So our overhead was pretty low. It was like buying food and a couple entertainment things.
Yeah. We do a little bit more now, but it's still the same heart that you had. Mission Placerville still lives that out. And the same heart that Andy had. Right? Of like that name, it still carries out.
That's cool.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so youth pastor, meaningful. You had many interns. Okay, me being one of them. I received a call into ministry through Mission Placerville.
That's awesome.
So Mission Placerville was like relational connection and then calling from God.
That's awesome.
Mission Placerville was very special to me, and to so many others. I want to go over my calling just because I think it's such a tale of the two coins, right?
Yeah.
Because I had grown up in smaller churches, and I don't know how to say it, but worship was never something I looked forward to growing up.
Yeah.
And like service was never something I looked forward to. So I'll say my side of the coin on what was going on for me that Mission Placerville, and then I'd love for you to share behind the scenes. We've talked about this, but So we go to Mission Placerville, and every night session, there's like a speaker, and then worship, speaker, and then small groups, kind of like youth group, but a little bit longer of a time.
I put you on a team with Hannah.
Yeah,
that was probably the most
me, Hannah, and Zach.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
But
no. But I think
if I'd only known.
That was right before Shannon had the conversation of like, hey, my daughter will not date until she's 18.
That's hilarious.
And like we had to back off that for a bit. That's
cool.
Another topic for another time.
Well,
but
here we are. Yeah. 2 kids later.
I know. Yeah, exactly. So we're in service, and I remember it was a unique one that I had never experienced before, where it was worship, and then a worship team member would share testimony, and then it was more worship, and a worship team member would share more testimony, and it was like over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Really, really powerful, impactful for me. And I remember there was one moment of them like saying, hey, just kneel to the ground and just spend this time to talk to God for a moment. It's like a pause. And so I'm kneeling, and I'm at this point, I'm a junior. It's like my junior summer going into my senior year.
Yeah.
And I'm at this point convinced that I'm going to do occupational therapy because I have a special needs brother and have grown up in the special needs community and have a passion for helping special needs students. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go into occupational therapy. I knew what school, and had somewhat of a plan. So I'm sitting there and I go, God, what do you want me to do with my life? I'm sure something from the testimony and the prompt kind of led me to ask that question.
Yeah.
And I just felt so clearly, like in closing my eyes, seeing words on the back of my eyelids of like youth ministry. And it was just so clear to me that God was saying, go do youth ministry. We met soon after and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, is the side of the coin that I experienced that night. Walk me through that night of Mission Placerville and what you're going through as the coordinator and leader.
Yeah. So that year I think lost both speaker and band, like in the days, like the 2 days before Mission Placerville.
Okay, so when did you lock them in?
Like at least 2 to 3 months before.
Yeah. So a lot of time beforehand.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So we lost our speaker a couple times over the years, right before the event. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to be speaking this week for Mission Placerville. So yeah, so that was tough. So then my friend from Solid Rock Faith Center, Sean, he was youth pastor over there, and he was going to have his youth group and his summer intern people come and join us for the service projects. So I remember the first day, I think we got through the first night of Mission Placerville with me speaking and a cobbled together band. I think some of the people from the church who were volunteers with the youth group, I think maybe the Blairs stepped in.
Yeah.
I think maybe Dan and Shelley like stepped up and like did worship and had Jesse and Amy help and stuff like that. I think that's maybe what happened. But then I was talking to Sean, we're out the service project, and he's like, how's the week going, man? I'm like, well, like in some ways really good. In other ways, like this happened. He's like, oh my gosh, are you serious? Yeah. And so it was him and his friend Eli, and which not the same Eli that's the youth pastor now, different Eli. Mm-hmm. And they were like, dude, we could like come do worship. And I was like, that'd be cool. And then it hit me because I knew them, like we had interacted quite a bit and done events together, and I had met their student leadership team and everything. And I knew they had some really like dynamic stories to share about how God had like worked in their lives. And so I was like, what would you guys think about sharing your testimonies as like our, like doing a hybrid of like worship time testimony, like, and that would just be our evening session. And I forget, either I said that or Eli said that. I forget who, one of us or Sean, like one of us came up with the idea, and it was like, dude, that's it. And so they were totally on board, and they came in, and so God just totally orchestrated me like having a heart attack for 2 days to, invite you to come into youth ministry. So it's pretty exciting. But that's on me because he tells us not to be anxious about anything. So, I was choosing to be anxious, and
see, I didn't, I didn't know that side of the coin for many years. And I forget, we had a conversation a few years ago that you had kind of shared that, and that blew my mind because
that was totally unplanned. That was like that afternoon, they decided to do that, and all that fell into place within hours for that to happen for you. So
and
it was
that
totally
God would like take that to link you and I together, you being mentor. Like I go like, hey, you're the only youth pastor that I know. Like, what do I do? I feel like I'm called to take your job.
Yeah. And you did. You ended up doing that.
Yeah, succeeded. Yeah, that's it. I'm done. It's good. Just crazy how those things that were like, I don't know what's going on. This all fell through. That God's still gonna do crazy things with that. Yeah. And like, no offense, but I don't remember any of the other nights. Like,
I don't specifically
That's
either.
the
That's why
only
I can't even remember who did worship or
I
who did
remember.
like who
Yeah.
spoke. I would imagine I probably spoke for a night or two. That's probably why you don't remember it. And like, yeah, I don't know. I would, if I had to guess, I would say that was probably what happened, but
Yeah.
I'm not positive on that.
Yeah.
I don't remember totally.
So crazy. So okay. So then I become your intern, so on and so forth. And then you have this moment of like, and we'll blaze through this, but if you want to talk about any of this more, like feel free.
Yeah.
You feel a moment of like, hey, at least right now, like youth ministry is not the thing anymore, and not at least right now. Like it's just
Yeah,
not the
yeah.
thing. Like I've lost. Yeah. So then there's this time of transition.
Yeah.
But I would almost dare to place it as a time of like waiting.
Yeah.
So knowing you, I mean, there was so much, and feel free to talk about some of the events that happened in this, but you went through an extended period of waiting and trying and like figuring things out to where you are now. Talk about some of the things that have happened there. And then I have a question.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, it was like 2017, I think, when first felt like God was saying, hey, this is a season of transition. And it felt like, as I prayed about it, didn't really have any clarity as far as like transition to what, from what to what, where, what, anything like that. And so Megan and I were praying about it, and we felt really clearly that the one thing that God did say was like, focus on where you're at. And so it's interesting to think about like what happened over those next couple of years, and the people that God kind of like intertwined into our lives. And, so 2016, I would say like from 2016 through 2020 was just a totally transformational time for me and for Megan. And the big, there was just so much happening, right? Like I signed up, did a master's program from 2018 to 2020. We did, the youth ministry was like the best that as far as like the time that I was here from 2009 to 2020, 2021, it was like the best it was from in that window of time, right? Like I would say like 2016 to 2020. And we kind of hit a stride and things were going really well. Like we were, I think, discipling people well, walking alongside of students well, and just saw God doing some incredible things. And even out of that time, it's super encouraging to see a number of people just thriving in their faith. Even now, what is this, like anywhere from 6 to 8 years later? From that time, is just seeing people investing in their college campuses, involved in college ministries, people like you being in youth ministry, you and Hannah, investing in young people here. And like it's really cool to see the way that God worked in that season, even when we felt like we're not sure how long we're going to be here. Yeah. But we're able to keep it. I talked to David about it, and he was really gracious around all that, of walking alongside of me in that season. And then coming into 2019, we felt like God was saying, okay, now's the time to start looking for something else. And so we started looking, and just, I had this idea in my head, I guess, of like, oh, I'll be a lead pastor somewhere. And God just like closed doors of like over and over and over and over again. And ultimately we ended up going on staff with Elementum in 2022. And, we stepped down from here at the end of 2021, went on staff with Elementum 2022, and God just provided really well in the midst of all that with support raising and funding and everything. And that was a huge blessing. Our church family at Cold Springs had a huge, played a huge role in that. And yeah, so it was a
roller coaster.
Yeah, it was a roller coaster of a season, right? Like, because we didn't know where or when, or like we thought we were going to move and just didn't know where or when or whatever else. And so thought we were going to be going certain places a couple different times, and then things would fall through, just didn't work out at the last minute kind of thing. And but God kept us in the community here and allowed us to keep investing and open up a door to be over at Radiant Church now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's a good way to put it. Hearing you say, like, hey, we're involved in community here, and obviously, like, seeing you and saw that over that time, then I just wonder how you came to the decision to become a trader and go to Radiant.
Yeah. I don't know. That was interesting, like, process, right? Like, so they were needing somebody to come in as interim pastor, and we went and checked it out, and it seemed like it was a great, it ended up what we expected and what was there were very different as far as like people were really invested in the church and really wanting it to move forward and to enter a new season of health and ministry of the community and see it they really deeply desired for the church family to continue as a church family and also to continue making impact and ministry in the community. So that was probably the appealing thing with that. I thought leaving Cold Springs would involve us moving out of town though.
Yeah.
To be honest.
So yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming.
Totally. Okay, so from 2017 to what, 2021, 22? I mean, it's this extended period of waiting.
Yeah.
How do you wait well? Like, I just think that will speak to so many, whether it's high schoolers that are ready to be done. They're like, yes, I've been in a transition time. I'm ready to be out. I need to go. And they're waiting for that. Or it's college students that are waiting to be done, waiting for that job. Or they're back at home after college, like, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
Or it's just people in waiting. I'm feeling a transition. Like, how can we as believers in Jesus wait well?
Yeah. I would say like, I did not wait well many times. Like I felt anxiety, felt a lot of, you have a lot of questions and things that run through your head when you interview and like it's not working out. A lot of discouragement there and a lot of, a lot of no's to, towards me. So that was pretty discouraging. But early on in the process, I remember right after I'd interviewed with a couple different churches, and I think the second one said no. And I was at an Elementum event, actually, the organization I work with now, with that guy Andy, who'd been the youth pastor here when I was in high school, and we were up in Washington at this event, and this guy Ron Frost was there leading the event, and we were talking, and I got a call that it was like down to me or one other person for this lead pastor job at a church, and they were going with the other person, and so I was pretty disappointed, and I was talking to Ron and Andy and another guy who works with Elementum, Ben, was there as well in the car with us, and it was like, they're asking how you feeling about that, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And Ron goes, Nick, in my experience, when God sets us up for a transition, he brings what he has for us in the time that he has it. And the more that we can just wait faithfully and trust him that in his timing, things are going to work out and he's going to provide for us along the way, the more joy that we get to have and the more like we get to just be grateful to him when the opportunity or the thing that he has for us comes along. Yeah. And so that was super helpful because that gave me kind of a game plan moving forward from that point for the next couple of years. I think that was probably, 2019. That was like fall of 2019 when we had that conversation. So I still had a few more years of kind of in between space that I was navigating through, and that was super helpful for that. So, COVID came in the middle of all that. So that added another layer to the uncertainty and transitional stuff. So,
yeah. I think that's so good because I don't know. I feel like I have little experience in waiting. But there's times, right, that everyone goes through of like, I feel like there's something more. I feel like there's something different. I feel like there's something bigger, that there's something smaller. Like kids are moving out of the house. What is this going to be like? There's this waiting period of what that's looking like that can cause that anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would just say, like, going back to the thing I said earlier about what we felt like God said to us initially in the beginning of the season was, like, focus on where you're at. And I think a lot of times when we get caught up in how things are going to be better when we get where we want to be, we miss out on so much that's happening right in front of us. And so, I mean, in that transition season, like I said, we experienced a couple of our best years in youth ministry. It was incredible. Like, we really enjoyed it. And like, I went through a whole master's program, like or most of a master's program. Like, actually, the entire thing during that. There were 3 years in the middle there where I worked my way through that. Started like investing in some stuff with Elementum, which led to part of what God had for us next. And so just looking at the things that God, the way he was putting the puzzle pieces together, you can see in hindsight, like the ways that God was positioning me to take a next step and to move forward in a more healthy way as I did move forward. But in the moment, it's like, if all we're thinking about is what's next and we lose sight of what's right in front of us, I think that's what brings a lot of the anxiety, and that's what brings a lot of the dissatisfaction and everything else. So I think that would be probably the biggest lesson for me in that whole season, was just staying focused on what's in front of you and the opportunities that God puts in front of you. And even in the transition to Elementum, away from Cold Springs and towards Elementum, I did a lot of substitute teaching and stuff. And ended up substitute teaching this one class like 20 something times at the end of the school year in 2022, that spring or whatever. And then then I got picked up to go help out with adult education in the county jail, and then doing juvenile hall substitute teaching, right? And I had been working with like a challenging class, like the kids who were pulled out of their main classes and put in another class at the middle school that I was subbing at. And when I got up to the juvenile hall, one of those kids was like incarcerated or whatever.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And so he's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "What are you doing here?" I get to go home today. That's the real question, bud. So, but it was just an open door. Like, he largely like struggled against so many of the adult figures in his life, but it was like, we could have these conversations, and because of some of the rapport that we built up over the last month or couple months of the school year, the year before, and my consistency in that with him and how I treated him and everything, it carried over into the other environment. Where things were probably more volatile, and kids are more on edge, I would say. And I don't know, like, God just opened up tons of opportunities, even within that, like within those settings, to have conversations with people, to have, to share the gospel with multiple people in those settings. And that was just, really encouraging.
So there's so many things in that time when I was in high school, and like, we've maintained relationship a ton, obviously. There's so many things that you've poured into me that just live rent-free in my head, so to speak. But there's just this one image that I can like never get out of my head. And Nick, you see him moving because he's like a little nervous about maybe what I'm about to say. He's like, he's rolling through like crap. Oh no.
Daniel lived with us for a little while, so I'm
I know. And it's
about to get vulnerable.
You'll be back, and no, I'm not even going there. I'm going towards this one. We had to, for youth group, I was an intern. We had to clean up after the homeless shelter all the time that was in Faith Hall before we would do youth group. And what we had to do was set off these like cinnamon bombs where they would go off and they'd spray everywhere to like get the smell out. Faith Hall did not look like how it does. And I will never forget cleaning up the cinnamon bomb. We're going through. Nick goes to grab it. And the part is, I mean, there's all this stuff all over the floor, like right next to it. We just switched to like hardwood floor too. And he goes to grab it and he bends over. And it's like a TV show. He slips. His feet are in the air, like falls back on his back down. And me and I think Zach
Yeah,
were
it was
there.
Zach, yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we're in there. And Nick, I don't even remember what happened, what you said. It was classic. No, like, are you okay, dude? It was pure
Dude,
laughter.
It was super funny. And I remember that, like, it was like the sheen of whatever the chemical
Yes, yeah, that goes
disinfectant
off.
/ like
Bug
deodorizer
killer, yeah,
bomb.
yeah, nuclear.
And it's like
whatever,
right
yeah.
around the can. And I was like, all right, I got to be careful that I don't eat it right now. I bent over to grab the can and I felt myself losing my balance. And I remember like there was a moment where I thought I caught my balance and then like it was over. And all of a sudden my feet
yeah.
were up in the air and I was like, oh, I'm falling now.
It's like a sticker in my head
Yeah, that's
of your
awesome.
feet up in the air. And then like you got it all over your jacket. You put your jacket in your car. Then your
Oh,
car
dude, yeah, my car smelled like it
smelled
for
like
months.
cinnamon bomb like for months.
Oh my gosh, that was the worst. Yeah, that was the worst part of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many
But
different things. The other thing that I'll never forget, and you may not remember this or you do, I'm sure as I tell it, is that during high school, my parents split up and my dad moved to Elk Grove and my mom became someone who I couldn't live with for that season. And so I lived with Nick and Megan. And I am someone who wants to help people but not receive help. So this was like worst case scenario for me, like where I was in desperate need. And Nick and Megan stepped into that. And the first night that I was over, I'm sure that they could tell that I was uncomfortable. I was like,
he like didn't want to eat food.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to like put us out or something.
Yeah. I was so uncomfortable. And the first night that I was there, or one of the first nights, we played Madden on your Xbox till like 1 a.m.
Yeah.
Like super late.
Yeah.
And that, while funny, and like, Nick, you shouldn't have done that. Or like me, I shouldn't have done that, having to wake up for school.
Yeah.
Like, I'll never forget that because it was this moment of like, you just knew what I needed.
Yeah.
And just stepped into it in that moment. And
Yeah.
from then on,
That's cool.
I probably, still had some adjusting to do for sure.
Yeah.
But
I remember being like, I remember sensing like, yeah, they're like, I should hang out tonight.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that's the only time we stay up super late
I
playing
know, it
Madden,
is,
right?
yeah,
But still, yeah, it was super cool. It was a blessing to have you stay with us for a while. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Even ran off some tweakers who were trying to look into my house and thinking about breaking in when you got home from prom one night.
That's right.
Remember that?
I do.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I totally forgot about that.
There were two people like looking in
Yeah.
our living room window and front door window thing at
Yeah.
the top. And Daniel pulls in and gets out of the car and he's like, "Can I help you?"
Yeah.
And like, I don't know if you can see this on the camera or you certainly can't hear it through the podcast. We've never met Daniel. He's like 6'4" or so. And like,
Yeah.
probably at the time, like even as a senior in high school, was probably at least like 250 pounds, I
Yeah.
would guess.
Yeah.
And so like, he's a big dude. Like,
It's not.
and yeah, I think they took off running down the street.
Down the street.
Yeah.
And then towards the dead end that went off into the
the open
trees.
space. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not really forest because there's just
It's not, but there's a
houses
huge
on the
trail all
side.
through there.
There is. Yeah.
So
Crazy.
anyway.
Wild. So yeah. I know like we've left so much on the table. I felt this way with David too. But there's so much. So thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Like again, that I just feel that deeply of like that time of waiting and how to wait well is something that applies pretty broadly.
Yeah.
So thank you for insights there.
Yeah.
So on to the real important things.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
drink. The Bugatti Berry.
Oh yeah, the Bugatti
I
Berry.
mean, Bugatti.
I have drank
anytime you put Bugatti in the title.
almost half. Like honestly, for me personally, like seeing the name Bugatti attached to it, like what do you think the % chance of me ordering that would be?
0.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about this beforehand, like not with you. We don't really care. Like it's not an order system. You had no idea that you were getting a drink, like
Yeah,
at all.
yeah.
It's not an order. We don't really care what your order is, like what you want. We more just care about a unique name and a rating at the end of the
Rating,
podcast.
So,
Yeah.
So I have given it a fair shake here. Like I drank
Absolutely.
half of this, and so I don't hate it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a negative 10 to positive 10 rating
Yeah,
system.
with the 0 in the middle. Yeah.
fake berry flavor, I don't like.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of it. Right. This isn't overly over the top on that. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't taste like overwhelming.
For sure. So,
so
just before you like officially say your number, I'm just curious, like, again, what is that number that you're going to rate the blessing that I have bestowed upon you? The free item
the free
that you
drink.
didn't pay for.
Well, I mean,
the blessing that has
anytime
been
you get
brought
a
to
free
you.
thing, you can't complain.
Bugatti.
So that's
Yeah.
probably like 10 out of like, you know, on the -10 to +10.
Yeah.
Like, you just have to be appreciative for things that
You don't have to. It's a rating system. We want to be.
That is true. You don't have to be
remain
appreciative, but
unbiased
if you're
and
like not, then people will probably no longer
buy
be
you things.
generous for you.
Yeah.
towards you. So
Yeah.
that's not a good strategy.
Yeah.
Not good.
So what's the number? Bugatti Berry.
Yeah,
is
Bugatti Berry. Probably like a 2 for me.
Wow.
Like, certainly not anything like close to 10.
Yeah.
It's not bad though.
So
You know
it's
what I
like
mean?
yeah.
It's not bad. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of fake berry, but it's not overwhelmingly like syrupy or that tastes like cough syrup, kind of. I don't know, whatever. You taste some things and you're like, wow, this is just totally like
I got David a keto cloud is what it's called.
a keto cloud.
Yeah. So we rode the cloud of ketosis in the last episode.
Yeah.
And it had like a sugar-free syrup, and I don't know. For me, the sugar-free syrups like that just lingers. So okay, similar vibe. I think I'm on the same boat as you. I'm like a 1.
Yeah.
Like it's not a 0 of like I'm indifferent.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a 1 of like
I wouldn't buy it.
yeah.
I
wouldn't
personally
either.
wouldn't order that.
Bugatti seems like a bold word to attach to
It
the
does.
drink.
It does.
I feel like there's got to be something a little bit more extravagant.
Yeah.
But so there you go. Now you guys know if you go to Dutch Bros, the Bugatti Berry, that's what we think of it.
Like, did they put some like gold dust in there or something like that?
Yeah.
Like, what's
They
going on
should
with
have.
Bugatti?
I mean, I paid about that much for
Yeah.
it as if there was gold
Shoot.
dust. So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you again for joining the Pop Podcast here with me and Nick this time. And again, we'll be dropping our episodes every Wednesday. So tune in next time to the Pop Podcast. Thanks, guys. Booyah. It's over.
Cool. All right. Yeah.